We're live? Okay. So we are here today with the Honorable Mayor, Stephen Del Duca. Without formalities, we're going to call you Stephen from here on out, okay?
Thank you.
And actually, that's the spirit of this discussion today, is really just to kind of get a sense of who you are as a person. I find myself, when I'm dealing with a lot of people in the community, there's almost like disparity between the politicians in the community. And you've always struck me as a real down-to-earth, living in Vaughan kind of guy. And then I'm going to throw out my own little tidbit. And this is just the way I participate in the community. I always feel like whether you're a parent or you're in the community, it's not a spectator sport.
Yeah,
you got to be involved, right?
Yeah.
And I think that the times that I've seen you out and about, you strike me as that person. That's why our team kind of gravitated to reaching out to your team, which I got to thank. They've been great at getting us together. And I think we'll start there in the sense of, I get the kind of person you are, but what got you into politics? Like, what got Stephen to say, hey, this is the trajectory of my life?
Yeah, I'll try to keep it relatively short. It did begin a long time ago for me. I'll be turning 51 in early July. But I was a kid. I was 14 going on 15. I was asked to get involved as a volunteer at that point in time through a member, a relative, who wanted me to come to a political meeting. I asked my parents if I'd be okay to come. They said yes. I said yes. I got to that first meeting at a very young age. And it was literally just being at the meeting and helping put out, I called it was unskilled labor, is what my cousin was really looking for me and a bunch of other young guys to put out tables and chairs. But I was really kind of taken with the spirit of that individual meeting. I then got involved as a volunteer in the ensuing federal election in 1988 and just kind of caught the bug and developed a really good network. And then eventually, many, many years later, after lots of volunteering and a little bit of working inside government, once I had finished university, I got the opportunity to run, and I did so, and served as a member of provincial parliament, cabinet minister, Ontario Liberal Party leader, and now mayor of Vaughan. So it's a long journey, but the elected portion of it's been relatively short.
It seems like obviously you've gotten your feet wet in it. I think for me, and we talk about, and what I love about conversations like this that fascinate me most, especially leaders such as yourself that are in charge of groups and groups of people, is almost finding, that balance between responsibility and accountability. Right? Meaning, and I'm sure you've been there, where there's a ton of stuff that happens, let's say, under your watch that wasn't technically your responsibility, or even stuff that happened before your watch.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, you become mayor of this incredible town that has a lot of great things happening, a lot of not so great things happening, and all of a sudden you're held accountable.
Yeah, that's part of the job,
right? And that's one of the things that I think is lost on people, understanding the accountability part, even though it might not exactly be somebody's fault. I see that whether it be parenting, whether we see, let's say teachers inheriting a student that they say, hey, it's not my fault this kid is this way, but a teacher might take accountability for the fact that even though they weren't the cause of it.
Right.
How do you see that? Obviously, you stepped into a mayor scenario where there was a previous mayor here for a long time.
12 years.
And did you see a lot of stuff that you were like, oh my goodness, I got to repair a bunch of stuff? Like, what was your take on when you made that transition?
No, in fact, one of the themes of my mayoralty campaign was one of the implied themes was this notion of continued stable leadership. And I think that's what the residents here in the city of Vaughan want to see. I think in the preceding 12 years under the former Mayor Bevilacqua, we had accomplished a great deal. A good chunk of that happened while I was the member of provincial parliament. So I had the opportunity to work with Maurizio to deliver the hospital and our residential hospice and highway expansions and opening our subway station and 2 subway stations in 3, technically, if you include Black Creek Pioneer Village there. So we did that in 2017. So we worked in partnership and delivered a lot of things jointly. I think prior to that, the city had been going through, I'm talking prior to 2010, had been going through a bit of a rough patch. So one of the things I did run on, in addition to fighting traffic gridlock, was this idea that I think our residents want that stable and thoughtful and responsible leadership. And I think that's what I've done my best to try to deliver for the year and a half or so that I've been mayor. But the accountability piece is critical. It can It can be a little bit tough on elected officials when they are held to account for things that maybe they didn't do or not do directly.
Yeah.
But we have to be eyes wide open when you put your name on a ballot and you put your name on a sign and you knock on doors and ask people to give you their support and their faith. The choice is then theirs, what they want to hold you to account for. And that is literally part of the job description when you're an elected official. So some people can't handle that, but I've been through a lot in my political career, a lot of real highs and some real devastating lows. You just have to accept that if you're going to lead, in this case, lead a city that's as fantastic as Vaughan.
Well, I can tell you for myself as a voter, and obviously I speak to a lot, given that, we work real estate in the community and we do a bunch of stuff. Most people don't know all the issues. Yeah. And I'm going to say, as well versed as I might be, there's a bunch of stuff that I don't know.
Right.
So often I will pick a candidate that I kind of judge them on a couple of things. A, what kind of moral character does that person have? Right. Meaning, like, if I get a sense of what keeps them up at night and what gets them up in the morning, I can at least identify with the kind of person, and then whatever that person might deal or face with, I'm going to have confidence in, okay, you know what? I met this guy, Steven. I don't know everything about him. I don't know all the issues of Vaughan.
Right.
But I get a sense of what keeps him up at night.
Right.
And what wakes him up in the morning. And that's good enough for me to get at least a vote in.
Right.
And I guess
that's fair.
That's what I'd lead to you, is what does get you up in the morning and what does keep you up at night?
So I tell people, again, through all the political jobs or elected jobs that I've had over the years, the most important role that I will ever have in my life is being a dad. And my daughters are 16 and 13. When I first ran in 2010 municipally, but 2012 provincially, in 2012, my younger daughter was a year old. My older daughter was 4. And they are the reason that I'm motivated to serve this community, because I am hopeful. Even though it's a bit challenging right now around housing affordability, I'm hopeful that they will want to stay here in Vaughan, here in York Region, here in the GTA, and making sure that this community, where I've lived for close to 40 years, so most of my life, which has been great throughout the time that we've lived here in terms of quality of life, continues to be good for them. So being able to afford a home or getting into the housing market, being able to find employment that rewards them both financially, but also sort of nourishes their soul and makes them their souls and makes them happy. Being able to do that somewhat close by to home, if not, in fact, right here in Vaughan, making sure they can get from point A to point B safely and efficiently. These are the things that, making sure our community remains the safe community that it's always been. These are the things that I want to see for them and for others like them. And so that's what gets me out of bed in the morning, making sure that Talia and Grace have a really great city to continue to grow up in. And I think that's what motivates most members of council here, that idea of what past generations gave us, we have a fundamental obligation to pass on to the next generation and those who will follow us. And so, it's pretty straightforward for me. There's no... Yeah.
Well, and that's what that's what I've gathered, right? And that's why I kind of started this with the whole, parenting is not a spectator sport. It's not something you can do from the sidelines. And if you're in the community and you're doing a heck of a lot of complaining, which, my father always taught me really a general principle, which was, before you complain, find the solution.
Right.
Don't start your sentence with the complaint. Start your sentence with the solution to whatever you were planning on complaining about. And I got to imagine, given what you just said and the diversity of what Vaughan started off as and what it's become. I don't envy politicians sometimes in the position you're in, where you have a lot of different groups culturally vying for different things that are really important to them. And you have to kind of sift through the priority meter and say, okay, which group or which set. Is that something that you internalize, or you talk about it with your team? Like, how do you prioritize which needs of which cultures in the community get your attention?
I think the most important thing for me is that we are here in Vaughan very diverse, very inclusive, very welcoming. We are a city that's gone through a ton of change in a relatively short period of time, because the growth has been literally exponential, and we're going to continue to grow for the foreseeable future. That can put a lot of stresses and strains on a community. But what I've learned and what I know, and I see this firsthand regularly, is that by nature, the people of Vaughan are problem solvers and they are generous. That's their natural outlook. And so it's actually not been that difficult to kind of navigate through that diversity. One of the things that was really important to me as mayor, starting from the very beginning of this term, was this building that we're sitting in right now, City Hall, which, has been here. It's a beautiful building. It's been here now and open since 2011. There are a lot of people that I've met in the community from the diverse communities that we have who have said to me, we've never been inside City Hall. So we've always celebrated a great many of the cultures and faiths that we have in the city, but I made a specific decision to actually add to the list. And so we now do events, for example, Tamil Heritage Month, Nowruz, which is among other communities, excuse me, like a Persian New Year.
Yeah.
And we've done a bunch of others. Those are just two examples. We've literally opened up the doors of this place. We've had thousands of people come through for these festivals and celebrations. We've been doing some for decades. We've, again, grown the list this term of council, and I love it. And we get to showcase what it means to be part of this city. And I want people to feel welcome and welcomed in this building and demystify, I guess, part of the work that we do or all of the work that we do on their behalf. So for me, it's actually kind of second nature to embrace all of this, but to remind everyone, notwithstanding the individual cultures or faiths that we might come from. I'm half Italian, half Scottish, for example. My wife is Portuguese. My kids obviously have a lot going on in terms of their backgrounds, but that's the beauty of Canada and the beauty of Vaughan. For me, the most important thing is to remind people, despite the diversity, we have to find unity in the community to literally remind ourselves and each other that it's about building a really, really great city, and we're all in it together. And again, I think most Vaughan residents get that and support that.
Yeah, and in so many ways, Stephen, our worlds align in the sense that I'm helping families get into communities as a realtor, and our team does that. So we're boots on the ground at seeing how the needs of a community might change based on the diversity of who's coming in, how they're coming in. And demystification, that word that you use, is brilliant because I find myself closer to certain cultures for the fact that I've helped them get into different communities. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you start to realize certain principles that we're really not all that different. And, when I'm negotiating at the real estate table, we usually talk about finding the one common denominator that everybody can agree on. Right. Because there's 100 things in a negotiation that you might want to disagree on. But if you can find the one common denominator that keeps you together, such as what you mentioned, family and protecting family, and then, safety and things around that, all of a sudden, the differences start to matter less.
That's correct.
Right. Yeah, and then when you don't identify that common denominator, then the differences start to add up. Right. And I think that's probably where I've personally struggled with it. And I'd love to get your take on this, which is diversity is obviously a cornerstone for Canadians, acceptance, tolerance. But obviously in the wake of 2024, we're getting to a point that some people aren't as tolerant, the whole wokeism part of the conversation and stuff like that. And I always wonder in your position, how you balance that between saying, okay, at what point is tolerance gone too far? Or is there ever a point?
Yeah, listen, I think that's really tough space to navigate for elected officials. I think that far too often, a lot of politicians, especially those that might be getting ready for an election campaign, they go out of their way to try to sort of pick at those wedges. They rage farm around a lot of that. That's, this concept of making sure that you're getting attention, you're getting the clicks. We talked about that a little bit earlier. I think there are people who try to exploit those differences and use that for political gain. I think that's happening a lot more today than it has in the past. I think that's a big problem. But I talk an awful lot about this idea. Again, I go back to the concept of unity, of trying to put one's community ahead of oneself. In fact, just the other day here in this council chamber, in this building, talking about what has the potential to be a bit of a contentious issue, trying to remind people that in our country, the beauty of what makes Canada Canada is that we have rights and freedoms that we need to cherish and we need to nurture. But those rights come with responsibilities and obligations to one another. And for example, the people who framed and wrote our Charter of Rights and Freedoms specifically, explicitly put into the text of the Charter that that community element, that obligation that the collective has to build something unified. They wrote limits into the Charter specifically to remind you and I that while we might have rights and freedoms that we need to make sure are guaranteed, we still have a fundamental obligation to one another to build a society that isn't torn apart at the seams. And so it is a challenge right now to spread that message, but it's something I believe probably more strongly than anything else. And it's something I'm not going to stop talking about. And I believe, by the way, that the vast majority of Vaughan residents agree wholeheartedly with that concept. We have rights, but we have responsibilities and obligations to one another. That's how you build something truly magical.
And I mean, we're seeing right across the board, obviously, how tolerances and immigration and getting a city to work properly. I mean, obviously, this week, on a side note, has been a heck of a week for Vaughan. I mean, I know I've seen some of the statements coming from your office between the shooting at Vaughan Mills, obviously, the more recent in Valour Village, 4 people getting killed there, and then completely unrelated, but a little boy, trying to board a bus. And the thing that I grapple with, and I wonder when you're in that position where you're seeing a bunch of stuff happening that, again, out of your particular control, but as a city grows and a lot of people coming in with different value systems, do you feel that there might be a correlation between the kind of crimes we're seeing? And this is not just a Vaughan problem. Obviously, we're seeing it in Toronto too, between the carjacking, the excessive lack of just regular criminal respect that we would have had growing up. I think you and I are from the same era. Do you see some of a correlation between the kind of immigration we're seeing, or is it, in your opinion, simply a numbers game? Meaning, the more people you get, harder it is to manage. What's your take if you had to give?
I don't personally see any direct, and I've seen no facts to back up that there's any relationship between immigration and incidents of crime at all. I think it's really important for us to stress that we are a country that's being built literally on immigration. And we need to continue to recognize and respect that. To be frank about it, we don't have a birth rate in this country that would actually help sustain the economy that creates the quality of life that I want my daughters to be able to enjoy. We need to continue to attract the best and the brightest from around the world. People, whether that's in the skilled trades or it's in healthcare or it's in science, whatever it's in, whatever realm, whatever part of the economy that we're talking about. I think what we have happening in the city of Vaughan, which can be is of great concern, especially to longtime residents like me and so many other families that what we have, is that we are increasingly urbanizing in our city. You look at our downtown core, the Vaughan Metropolitan Center. I think when we moved to Vaughan in 1986, the tallest building might have been 3 floors.
That's right.
Maybe the mountain at Canada's Wonderland, which was being built just as we were moving here, or had
and
just
the drive-in at Highway 7
and
the
drive-in. Well, 2 drive-ins, Langstaff and 27 and 400 and Weston, or 407. Those were probably the tallest structures in the city. Right now, we have buildings that are over 60 floors that are being built in the Vaughan Metropolitan Center area. So with increased urbanization and a small transition or a big transition away from being only a suburban bedroom community, there is a distinct change that occurs. And I know it's not always a welcome change for our longtime residents. That's probably right now the most difficult space to navigate. People are concerned about that change. What they move to, what they believe we've built in Vaughan is now kind of fraying or being destabilized. But I remind everybody that Vaughan has, first of all, no city is static. It's never crystallized at one point in time and stays like that forever. Before we moved to Vaughan, first in Kleinburg, and now my family lives in Woodbridge, Vaughan was all farmland, right? And so when we first came in the 80s, that was a big change from what we'd been before. What's happening now is that increased urbanization. I would say on the issues of any form of crime, in particular crime that takes a life. And then you mentioned the young boy at 6 years of age. I went to the vigil that was held in the community in Kleinburg just a number of days ago, Friday night. Every one of those incidents is actually like a body blow for me. It really does knock the wind out of you when you see a 2-year-old in the Valour Village shooting who lost his life senselessly, needlessly. I am not at all desensitized to that. So I know we put out these statements, and I'm sure some residents think, sure, it's easy for a politician to put out a statement. I do have a responsibility to be responsible for the entire community. But those incidents, especially when people lose their lives, they do hit me hard. And it's a lot for us to deal with. I would just say we're very blessed in Vaughan. York Regional Police does do a fantastic job. And in the two recent shootings, arrests were made within 24 hours in both cases. So that doesn't make the crimes right, especially gun crimes, especially where people lose their lives. Horrible stuff that we have to do our best to stamp out. But this is a time, this is an era where we are going through a fair bit of change and churn in the community. And I know that's unsettling, but as a leader in the city, my job is to try to help everyone navigate that and maintain that character that we talked about a bit earlier in this conversation.
I feel when you mention, the body shot kind of thing, it does hit you personal. And I often get this question asked of myself too, anyone that does any kind of work in any field where it's like, how do you separate who you are personally from your business and, never mixing the two. And I know our team is big on this. I always tell people, when I wake up in the morning and I go into whatever I'm doing, I'm not a different person. Like I'm Frank wherever I go.
Right.
So I don't really mix or I never really actually, separate the two.
Right.
And I get the feeling you're somewhat cut of that cloth where, the politician Stephen is not different than the family man Stephen, which might not be different. Now, of course, there's certain things that you're going to have to deal with, but when you're feeling those kind of scenarios, and I think that that's probably what politicians are often thrown off the bus for, meaning like, he's a politician, he can't be a human being.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things that I simply applaud you at, because we make ourselves available in the community, and every time I'm around, I see you there. And that's what prompted us to kind of reaching out to you and try and help people understand the different levels of government even, right? Because, and I don't know how you feel about this, but I'm going to throw this out there where I have a pretty large family. I love them to death. And if somebody says, what's your surname? It's Fallico, and I'll die for that name. But if there's a cousin that's doing something that isn't too cool, I'm still Fallico. But I'm going to step to him and say, hey, listen, this is not really helping our family situation. Do you ever find yourself in that boat, given that, given, let's say that you happen to be a liberal, not everybody is happy with Trudeau as an example. You're part of this big family that I'm sure sticks together. And there's times that a family member might do stuff that doesn't really help your local cause, but you're having to put on that brave face. How do you manage that?
Well, I made a conscious decision. I mean, everyone knows I'm a liberal. I mean, I was the leader of the Ontario Liberal Party for 2 years. It's kind of hard to say at this point in my career, I'm unaligned. I am a liberal. Everyone does know that. I'm proud of, I'll call it my political heritage. I think liberals have done lots of great things for our country and province through the years in general. But I made a conscious decision when I decided to run for mayor that I was entering a new phase of my political journey. And the new phase is what I call my post-partisan career. And so I think if you talk to any of the other elected officials that we have here in Vaughan, federal, provincial, or even my council colleagues at the federal and provincial level, obviously people are directly and explicitly partisan. I have worked with everybody. I love working with everybody. I think my obligation to the people of Vaughan is, in fact, to work with everyone, regardless of partisan stripe or level of government, to in turn deliver positive things for the people of Vaughan. And so I have worked very hard to not at all be kind of stuck in a little bit of a partisan box. Here's a great example. I ran against Doug Ford to be premier in 2022. Yes. Obviously, I didn't win, and he did. If you were to see Premier Ford and myself when we announced the medical school, the York University Medical School being built here in Vaughan, when he made the announcement that day and I spoke at that announcement, I in fact said to people, I said to the audience and to the cameras, I think anyone going back in a time machine a couple of years ago, hearing me say complimentary things about Doug Ford and vice versa, would have seemed like a very unlikely thing to occur. And the audience kind of laughed. But the fact that I'm able to work closely with the premier, with the local MPPs, most of whom, actually all of whom in Vaughan are from the Conservative government, I think speaks volumes about putting the partisanship to the side and focusing on the people. And by the way, that's what people want to see. They don't want their lives to be made more difficult simply because you're on one team and I'm on the other. So I've made that, that has been a purposeful and deliberate decision that I've made. I don't go to partisan events anymore. I have let my membership in the Liberal Party provincially and federally lapse. I don't make donations anymore. That doesn't mean I don't have values that are aligned with the Liberal Party. I still do. Right. But my job right now is to be mayor of this city, and that's what I'm exclusively focused on.
And I think that that's what people feel, because obviously Canada being so close to the U.S., it's often that we mimic some of what's happening there, right? I mean, I can't help but think the what's happening between Biden and Trump is starting to lend itself a little bit to what's going on between the liberals and the conservatives, at least as far as what we're seeing on social media platforms, as far as the clickbait that we were speaking of.
Yeah.
They call it outrage mail, right? So anything to get a rise out of people versus bringing them a little bit closer together. And I'm just wondering, given that you're at that level, are you seeing an increase in that as well, where liberals and conservatives, even though they probably agree on more things that they disagree, that what's getting difficult is trying to get people to understand that they're actually on the same team, trying to get Canada in a certain place.
When I talk to the individual MPs or MPPs, we do a lot of events together in common. We have Canada Day coming up in a few days. I expect when the city of Vaughan hosts its Canada Day celebration, all of our MPPs and MPs will be there. At a personal level, I see a lot of collegiality. I see everyone trying to get along. I think at an official level, especially when you're getting closer to an election, and I think everybody anticipates there'll be a federal election sometime probably next year, I think that's when things start to get a bit dicier because people are, I guess it's natural in our political system, which is a bit adversarial by design, that the closer you get to an election campaign, the more people are looking for the votes, looking for the advantage. Absolutely. I am sincerely hopeful that whatever might exist out there that's a little bit taking away from that sense of unity, I hope here in Vaughan that'll be kept to a minimum, and we'll remember that again we have one overriding purpose, which is to build a great community, which we've done, and I want us to continue to do. But I won't be getting involved in provincial or federal campaigns. I'm really actually enjoying my post-partisan career.
Well, you're talking about unity, and I can tell you, going back to the common denominator conversation, one thing that I can tell you at least unanimously that I've been seeing that gets people together is their agreement on how bad traffic is. And that's not just in Vaughan, but in Toronto. And you were the traffic minister. So,
transportation.
I
wasn't responsible for traffic. I was responsible for traffic is the solutions. Yeah.
Having your background, is there anything that you're seeing that's like, geez, they're doing this wrong? Or, I know it's not your responsibility, but...
Yeah, it's our challenge in the city of Vaughan, and it's, again, you made a great point. It's not unique to Vaughan. Our challenge is that we have grown, in our case as a city and as a region here in York Region, at tremendous rates for decades. And we've permitted that growth to occur without building all of the infrastructure that we need at the same time as our growth. So now when we go back and try to build subway lines or bus rapid transit or new east-west roads or new highways, as critically important as they all are, we're doing it after the growth is here, after the people are here in great numbers. So what does that do? That makes traffic worse, the gridlock is worse, but that also makes the projects that we are now embarking on more expensive, more disruptive. So I have tried in as many different ways, pushing as many levers as I can to say for our new growth that's coming, we need the infrastructure either in place first, or at least we need a plan, including the funding, to have those two things move at the same time. And for those things where we already have the growth, again, one of the centerpieces of my last election campaign to become mayor was we have a whole series of east-west roads, major east-west roads in the city of Vaughan that don't connect all the way through. Kirby, Teston, Langstaff, for example, three big ones. When you have that many major east-west routes that don't connect, not to each other, but don't connect east-west, right? That puts more pressure on Major Mac, Rutherford, Highway 7. So we have started construction on connecting Kirby between Dufferin and Bathurst. The region, for the first time ever, has put Teston being connected between Keele and Dufferin into their 10-year capital plan. I want to advance that even more quickly. And I am in conversations with CN and the region about how we can build a bridge over the CN McMillan Yard so that Langstaff will connect east and west. That's a big project. That's a really expensive project. That might take a little bit longer. But those are the projects that I'm very much focused on. And I believe we will deliver on them. I have a 9-point plan to fight traffic gridlock. I said we can get it done over a decade. I believe that's true. We're just, we've got to stay focused on it.
I think I have this conversation with a lot of families because I help them move in and out of cities. And traffic and commuting is one of the biggest reasons they move out of a city. And convenience is one of the reasons they move into a city. So obviously with all the conveniences that we had, like obviously having the hospital and so forth, I start to look at things of this nature, which is if people kind of appreciate that Vaughan is almost like a toddler that eventually became a teen, that is now trying to become an adult, you always have a bit of that ugly duckling stage.
Yeah.
And I try and tell my own clients that if they can persevere through the ugly duckling stage, then you get to a point where the city starts to function a lot better. You always have that change and adapt. So I appreciate you you saying that. I think we're going to leave on this note. If there's anything that you would say is maybe like the singular thing that you'd like voters or people to know about you moving forward? I know you hit on probably a bunch of stuff already, but is there anything that maybe we missed that you'd like to say to the people?
Yeah, I would just listen, honestly, first of all, thank you for this opportunity. Really enjoyed the conversation today and look forward to hopefully many more. It's kind of picking up on that theme that you expressed in your last comment. I really do hope people understand we do have something special here in the city of Vaughan. There is, and I've traveled through politics to lots of other parts of Ontario and Canada, a city that's 350, almost 350,000 people. What we've created here in Vaughan is very, very unique. It is very special. We have some growing pains, to your point, of the ugly duckling stage. That's a really good way of describing it. I would tell the people of the community, have faith and have confidence, knowing that we are doing a good job of getting through this phase and getting to the other side. City Council is very, very unified in this regard. And for me personally, I love the opportunity to serve again, in this case, serve as mayor. I'm hoping to have this ongoing responsibility for a few years to come. And I love the community, and I hope that people can see that I do care, and that I won't stop caring, because I want to make sure that, again, what my parents in effect gave to me and my brothers and my sister, I'm in turn able to give to my kids and hopefully one day grandkids in the distant future. But that's, to me, the core responsibility, and I want to do all of that work and perpetuate that magic right here in Vaughan.
Fair enough. Well, listen, on a personal note, I want to thank you, because I know that managing a city is busy, and your team was exceptional at setting this up. And like I started the whole conversation, which is, it's not a spectator sport. We try and get involved as a team, the Fallico Group, and as well, we couldn't do that without politicians as yourself and other people that just make this city work. So on behalf of our team and your team, I want to thank you again. Thank you, Stephen.
Thanks, Frank. Appreciate it. Thank you.